Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight for the May monthly meeting for 350 Wisconsin. So my name is Christina Cook. I'm a member of the monthly meeting team that helps coordinate these meetings. I'm happy to welcome you, and I'm joined by Marion Friedel and Susan Nossel, who are also members of the monthly meeting team and help this meeting go, along with assistance from 350 Wisconsin staff. So uh, we're going to start by acknowledging where we are. And Brittany, are you able and willing to do the land acknowledgement?
Yes, I can.
Right, thank you.
As we gather here tonight to organize in pursuit of intersectional climate justice, we must also recognize that we are part of a system shaped by white colonialism, genocide and ethnic cleansing, and forced removal of the indigenous nations who have called this land home for thousands of years. This land that we call Wisconsin is the ancestral homeland of nations including, but not limited to, the Ojibwe, Ho-Chunk, Potawatomi, Dakota, and Menominee peoples, and these nations continue to call this land home to this day. We invite you to learn more about the tribal histories of your location, and we call on governments, communities, and ourselves to fight the erasure of Indigenous history by honoring Indigenous voices, stories, traditions, and leadership in our lives and work.
Thank you, Brittany. All right, and see the notes in the chat for those who want to learn a little more. Susan, you can go to the next slide. So once again, thank you for joining us, everyone. Here's our plan for the evening. So we'll be hearing two presentations, quick presentations from some recent interns who were working at 350 Wisconsin, our main speaker, Jess Guffey Calkins, and then some announcements and updates. And an extra welcome to those of you who are new to 350 Wisconsin or here for the first time. There'll be opportunities at the end of the meeting to get connected, but also feel free to, share your name in the chat or get in contact with Nikki, or volunteer coordinator, at any time. As part of welcoming others, we want these public meetings to be welcoming and supportive of all people, regardless of background or identity. And so I think Marion has shared our code of conduct in the chat to provide more context. And if you have any questions, you can contact myself. All right. So with that, we'll jump into our sort of shorter opening topic. You can keep sharing, Susan. Where we'll be hearing some campaign reports from 350 Wisconsin's inaugural Wisconsin Youth Leadership Development Program. And so Emily will start and share a little bit about the program, and then we'll hear about the intern's work.
Yeah. So just while Susan's getting the slides back up, this was our first year running our new program called the Wisconsin Youth Leadership Development, or WILD internship program. And what we really have been really seeing that a lot of young people want to be involved. They want to be leaders in their community, fighting for climate action, fighting for climate justice. But it's hard to know how to do that kind of work. And so what we wanted to do was have a place where the interns could learn some of those basic organizing skills, could learn how to plan out a campaign, and then work with a staff mentor throughout the course of 2 semesters. So this year we started with a smaller cohort. We started with 2 interns, Carson and Haley, and they both started with us in September and are wrapping up their internships this week. I can't believe it already, but yeah, really excited to be hearing from them. First, we're going to hand it over to Brittany. I don't know if we're getting the slides
Yeah,
back or not.
Susan, are you able to put the slides back up for this section?
Unfortunately, our intern Haley
Yeah,
had a last minute
yes,
family emergency come up, so Brittany is going to present on her behalf.
I'll be right there. Sorry about that. My apology, but it will just be right there. Just a second, please.
Brittany, you can probably start talking without the slides.
Okay, yeah. So, I'm sorry, my internet was acting up, so I'm just gonna keep my camera off for right now. I figured that the best way to talk about Haley's internship was to actually read something that she wrote. So we had the interns kind of write up a final report, some final reflections, and this is what she wrote. I did kind of cut some of it out to make sure that I wouldn't go too far over on the time, but these are Haley's words. When I began this internship, I set out with a straightforward goal: get the city of River Falls to pass a climate action plan. I grew up in River Falls. I knew its history as a sustainability leader in Wisconsin, and I believed that the momentum was already there, waiting to be channeled. What I did not yet understand was how much distance, geographic, political, and organizational, stood between a good idea and a past climate action plan. This internship taught me that organizing is not about the size of your ambition. It's about learning to match your strategy to the reality in front of you, and then building from there with patience, creativity, and willingness. My first major pivot came early, once I started doing real research and quickly learned that the city no longer had an active sustainability coordinator, no sustainability committee, and that the local government was not actively interested in adopting a full climate action plan. What had looked like a city on the verge of action was actually a community with a lot of goodwill and very little institutional infrastructure to act on it. So I adjusted. Rather than pushing for a full climate action plan, I shifted my campaign goal to passing a resolution asking the city to commit to creating one. A resolution is a lower barrier, more politically digestible, and far more achievable within my timeline. It also gives the community something concrete and public to rally around, which matters enormously when you're trying to build momentum from the outside. That pivot taught me something I will carry forward into any organizing work I do. Knowing when to adjust your goal is not a failure of ambition. It's a sign that you understand the landscape of the community you are working in or with well enough to well enough to work with it rather than against it. From there, the work became about building relationships and generating momentum one conversation at a time. I reached out to city council members with a survey designed to open a dialogue rather than demanding anything. I connected with Hope for Earth, which had been quietly doing coalition work in River Falls for years, learning from their organizational history and building on the relationships they had already established. I reached out to student organizations at UW River Falls, presented to the Environmental Sustainability Club, and began drafting both a petition and a full resolution. One of the most meaningful parts of this process was the coalition work itself. I came to understand that Hope for Earth had already been doing the long, slow, unglamorous work of building credibility in River Falls through action teams, EarthFest, faith community engagement, and years of relationship building with city staff and local organizations. My role was not to lead that work, but to plug into it, amplify it, and add a specific policy ask that gave all of that energy somewhere concrete to go. Connecting their organizing to a resolution and petition gave the campaign a tangible target while also giving Hope for Earth a tool they could continue using long after my internship ended. That kind of handoff feels important to me. Good organizing should not disappear when one person leaves the room. The challenges were real and humbling. Distance made everything harder than I anticipated. I could write emails, draft language, and coordinate over Zoom, but I was rarely physically present in River Falls to knock doors, attend council meetings in person, or hand someone a petition at a community event. I felt that limitation through the campaign, and it pushed me to be more intentional about identifying on-the-ground partners who could carry the work when I could not. It also pushed me to invest heavily in the digital side of organizing, building out survey tools, drafting materials that others could pick up and use independently, and thinking carefully about how to communicate in ways that would resonate even without a physical presence. Time was another challenge. Organizing at the local government level moved slowly, and a campaign that realistically needed 12 months of sustained pressure was being run within the shorter window of this internship. I had to get comfortable with the idea that my job was not necessarily to finish the campaign, but to move it meaningfully forward and leave behind something strong enough for others to continue. That reframing helped me stay focused on what was actually achievable rather than feeling discouraged about how much remained undone. What I am most proud of is the organizing skills I was able to learn through this whole process. I practiced writing a resolution that has been drafted with clear, concrete language. I created my first petition and worked to circulate that digitally. City council members have been contacted and some have responded with genuine openness to further conversation. Key relationships with Hope for Earth, UW River Falls sustainability staff, and community members have been established and maintained. And I was able to meet with the new mayor of River Falls, Allison Page, and talk about my project and what has come from it. River Falls was once a national leader in renewable energy and green power participation. A resolution like this is not a radical ask. It's a natural next step for a city that has always seen itself as forward thinking. This internship changed how I think about civic engagement and my role and about my role within it. I had understood politics mostly from the top down through elections, candidates, and legislation at the state and federal level. I am leaving with a much deeper appreciation for what happens at the local level, where the gap between a community's values and its government's action is often the most visible, and where individual organizers can actually close that gap through persistence and relationship building. I learned how to read a political landscape, how to approach city officials in a way that opens doors rather than closing them, how to build a coalition that is broader than any single organization, and how to keep pushing forward even when timelines slip and structures do not cooperate. I also grew personally in ways I did not expect. I became more confident reaching out to people I had never met. I got better at telling a story about why something matters, not just presenting facts, but making people feel connected to the cause. I learned to sit with uncertainty and keep working anyway. And I built a genuine connection to my hometown that I did not have before, one rooted not just in nostalgia, but in an understanding of its political landscape, its community organizations, and the real people working every day to make it a better place. River Falls is ready for a climate action plan. The people there care, the history is there, and the momentum is building. I am grateful to 350 Wisconsin and the WILD program for giving me the tools, the mentorship, and the space to help make that case. I cannot wait to see what comes next.
Awesome. And Carson, you're up.
Bravo, Haley.
Okay. Hi, I'm Carson. I was the other Wisconsin Youth Leadership Development intern, and I focused my project around climate curriculum and integrating it into our school's current education. Hmm. Go to the next slide there. Yeah, so I chose to do this project on climate curriculum and creating awareness at my school because I saw that my community was affected a lot by climate change. Um, and then also my personal experience at my high school was that I didn't really see much climate education. And I eventually found out, yes, I'm senior in high school. I eventually found out that it's it was fully possible for a student to go into high school and graduate with all the required classes, not learning about climate change at all. So I wanted to change that. I found a UW Extension study that said about a third of the jobs in my county were indirectly or directly related to agriculture, and that's obviously very affected by climate change. And then 98% of those family-owned farms, um, 98% of those farms are family-owned farms, which of course can't take the hits as big as those big corporate farms can. Um, then our area also has really bad flooding, which is somewhat climate induced. The Kick River watershed just from 2011 to 2021 saw one 100-year magnitude flood and then two 50-year magnitude floods, which should not happen in 10 years, right? So it really affects my community, and now that people knew about it, so I decided that I wanted to focus this campaign around changing education there. I started reviewing the official Wisconsin standards for science and looking at the official process, like through the school board, on how to change the curriculum there. And um, I found that the process took like 8+ years. It was a very long process. So we kind of had to pivot there and redesign the campaign by going with an interdisciplinary approach where we could change a bunch of classes very slightly and hope that like in aggregate they can have a similar effect to significantly changing the curriculum in a few classes. So what we did is we took a survey, which I'll show here in the next slide later, but we took a survey of the student body and we found that students wanted actually to learn about climate education, but they didn't really know a lot about it. And then we found the Wisconsin Climate Hub, which is a partnership between Milwaukee Public Schools and Subject to Climate that provides thousands of vetted listen plans that already take topics that are being taught like in economics, history, and other science subjects and kind of puts them into context of climate change. So we wouldn't need to change any standards themselves, but could just do it like through that. So we presented to the teachers, the different departments, and right now, we're working on getting a bunch of sub plans for many departments to for those sub days where kids aren't really doing that much to kind of teach them about climate through that. And then we also, for our English department, have a unit confirmed for next year that will be centered around climate education. We also focus on student engagement a lot. I created the Climate Advocacy Club here at my school, which is our district's largest student-led organization now. And we try to make these fun events that get kids engaged. We've done spring cleanups. And we've done like climate trivia through the announcements. And we also did like this climate myth busting thing. And then we've put designs around with that are really artsy. So we also try to engage students through that. So here's some photos. On the left here, you can see these are survey results. We got 96 responses out of a student body of 330. So we didn't get everyone, but we got a decent chunk. And you can see the colors that are not blue and red. So everything that's not blue and red there, students couldn't even give a base level explanation of climate change that answered the survey. But we also found that those same people, the overwhelming majority, right, in blue at the bottom graph there, found that um, those students want to see Viroqua High School, which is my school, do more to prepare students for the environmental challenges of the future. So our presentations were aimed at kind of closing that gap. And then on the right here, you can see uh, there were some pictures from the spring cleanup. We went around campus and cleaned up that, and then we also went to local park and cleaned up that. Um, so that was very fun. Next slide. So, one of the biggest challenges I faced was kind of voluntary student involvement with high schoolers. We have this little period at the end of the day that's about 30 minutes that we have to put all of our stuff in as a club just because it's a student-led club, so it can't interfere with instructional time. So that was a challenge. And then also, a lot of the high schoolers that joined our clubs were already ambitious, right? They were doing sports, other clubs, they had hard classes. So it was really hard to schedule with them and get that all planned out. But um, the team at 350 Wisconsin has been a really big help in this campaign. Like every week we have one-on-one check-ins where um, Emily helps me like plan my campaign and make sure it's moving forward, make sure that I'm not wasting my time with something that won't lead to a certain outcome and helping organize and put deadlines and stuff. That's been really helpful. And then at the beginning too, we had these worksheets that really narrowed like vague direction into wanting to make a change into an actionable plan, which I also found was very cool. And then a challenge, I mean, a lesson going forward was really just when organizing how valuable the ability to adapt is. Like when your plans don't work out or when certain people don't show up, or events collide. And I really appreciate this internship and um, would like to thank 350 Wisconsin for offering me a chance to change my community.
Yeah. Thanks, Carson. And again, thanks, Brittany, for sharing Haley's work. This is so cool and inspirational. And yeah, thanks for sharing about that experience and the changes you were able to make. Um, all right. So with that, we will transition to our next speaker of the night, Jess Guffey Calkins. So Susan, you can bring the slides down. So Jess is the Community Food Systems Educator with Extension Dane County at University of Wisconsin. One of her projects is the Dane County Food Action Plan. And so she'll be sharing how that project pulls together different community input and data to formulate specific goals, strategies, and actions focused on our local food system. And I'm excited to hear about this work and how it relates to the work that 350 Wisconsin is doing and yeah, all of that. So, Jess, there you
Great.
are in the
Yeah.
Zoom windows if you want to share your slides and take it away.
Okay. Perfect. I have to say those are some really hard acts to follow with the intern work there. That was extremely impressive. And yeah, that's awesome to hear. So thank you for sharing about that. And I will figure this out here. Okay. Is that showing up all right?
Looks good.
Okay, great. Okay, cool. Thank you. Um, So yeah, let's see. Thanks for the introduction and the invitation to be here tonight. I'm excited to share some, and then as I will talk about, there's I think opportunities for continued connection. So I'm looking forward to that as well. So let's see. First, I will just very briefly, just in case some folks might not know about Extension, um, it's throughout the state of Wisconsin. We have educators and offices throughout the state. We also have state specialists, and basically we're trying to develop educational programs and work that's based on university knowledge and university research, and then is tailored to local communities. And so specifically, I work in the Community Food Systems program, and so you can kind of see what that does in terms of food systems, which I'll also explain a little bit more too. I mean, I'm kind of guessing a lot of people on this call know about food systems, but I'll give just a little bit of background on that too. But you can see some of the areas that our program works on, and I would say I kind of work a little bit in various areas. It kind of depends, but the main focus areas that I work on are food policy and planning, as well as food access and local market activities and opportunities. Okay, so then community food systems. So there's all different sorts of definitions and graphics about community food systems, and that can range from pretty simple to extremely complex and anything in between. So I like to use this relatively simpler one. Essentially, what I usually like to say is just it kind of takes all the different activities and components that happen with producing food and eating food and what you do with it and getting it from place to place and just looking at that as from a system perspective and just kind of looking at all of those different pieces in connection with each other. So I really like this quote that talks about emphasizing, strengthening, and making visible all the different relationships between the individual sectors. And then, especially, what we like to talk about is the characteristics. Like, of course, it's not just the activities themselves and just making sure, like, okay, food is produced and it gets from one place to another, but also thinking about what are the characteristics of this system? Like, how are these activities being carried out? And further on that note, I guess a couple things. Um, the way that we approach food systems activities shapes the health, environmental, social, and economic outcomes of our food system. And then, so I promise this is brief before I get into the rest of it, but just a cool way to visualize like what's going on with food, looking at food as a system. Again, you can see like, so we kind of talk about it where it's kind of like bicycle gears. And so there'll be a little bit more of this that shows up in the next couple slides. But first, you just see those activities again that we've been talking about that kind of, just are the actual pieces of the food system. But as far as how those things are carried out, like I was talking about with those characteristics, is that it's all dependent about what we call the enabling environment, which is everything kind of around it. So whatever policies are in place or the environment, the public health, other factors, those are all things that are influencing and shaping those particular activities. And then one step even further beyond that, the characteristics of the enabling environment as well as the activities themselves are determined by the values that are being prioritized and emphasized. So you can kind of see how those values on the left side are the things that are driving the whole system. So that's, in a nutshell, a food system. So tonight I wanted to cover a couple things. I mean, again, I'm sure a lot of folks are pretty familiar with the intersections and connections between food systems and climate. So I'm just going to touch on that real briefly, and then I want to share more in depth about the Dane County Food Action Plan project. And then what I want to go from there is after I share some of the goals that we're working on with that, then I'll really make those connections between what we're hoping to work on and how that aligns with and interacts with climate action work as well. So some facts that I'm sure a lot of folks know is that the estimate is that around a third of greenhouse gas emissions are food related, and those are primarily from agriculture, as well as a smaller portion that's from food processing, food transport, and food waste. Agriculture occupies, according to the EPA, about 40% of global land and accounts for about 70% of freshwater use. And in general, I mean, it's a very overgeneralization, but consumers, since we do have this global operating food system where food is coming from all over the world, um, because of that, a lot of just consumers as a whole have developed preferences around food availability that continue to drive that global food system model. So, I mean, myself included, where I go to the store and I expect to see certain things, not necessarily always thinking about what season they're in or where they're coming from. And so that because there's that demand, then that continues to drive how that system is operating. But as we know, current agriculture practices and food systems components need to be changed in order to decrease emissions and the effects on climate. So that's one obviously huge piece. And then the other thing to name in all of this is that at the same time, since we already have current climate variability effects, those are increasingly making a lot of that agriculture and global food system pieces more difficult and untenable. And so that even more so underscores looking at local food system practices being needed to create a more reliable food system and food supply. So of course, those are things like major effects like declining crop yields and reduced nutritional quality and just kind of overall ag instability. So we'll come back to that. Oh, I guess I forgot I put this in here, but um, so yeah, this just shows, of course, on the left, some of the effects that are happening with climate, and then how that can is directly having impacts on agriculture. Okay. So one of the things that I'm trying to focus on tonight to share about is the Dane County Food Action Plan. Um, and let's see, I feel like okay. Yeah, I'm going to get to that in a second. So first, I just want to explain what a food system plan is. And I know I heard people earlier talking about climate action plans, and so I think that there's a lot of similarities, but just in terms of being under the food systems umbrella. So, food systems plan is a set of interconnected goals and strategies that, if implemented, can help foster healthier and more resilient food systems for a specific geopolitical area. So that's kind of the basic definition in a nutshell. Um, as far as what we've been working on in Dane County, this shows you our, I guess, core project team that we've been working on this project for a couple years now. And so you can kind of see there's extension, public health. There are the two food councils that are in Dane County, City of Madison Food Policy Council and the Dane County Food Council. And some of you might be familiar with some of the different nonprofits like REAP Food Group, Wisconsin Food Systems, Dane County Food Collective, and then we're also working with Mosaic, which is kind of a facility entity, and then Second Harvest Food Bank. And so overall, The project goal is to create a food action plan that drives the policy, resources, relationships, and infrastructure to transform our food system. So just to, I guess, share a little bit more about it. Let's see. Oops, I wanted to go back. Okay. Um, is that we have developed like a very collaborative, inclusive community engagement process so that we could get input from just all variety of stakeholders, of people. I mean, we always like to say that like everyone interacts with food in at least one way, which is of course as cares, but often many multiple ways. So just getting input from all different sectors throughout Dane County, and pulling that together along with existing data to formulate goals and strategies and actions focused on our local food system. And so remembering back to the model that we were looking at earlier with the values that were driving the system, we spent some time at the beginning of the project to really identify what kind of values are we trying to focus on and have in our minds as we want to put together this food systems plan. So these are some of those key values that are guiding the work. And as far as the process goes, we've gotten funding. The majority of the funding is through a USDA Regional Food System Partnership grant, and then we also have funding from Dane County government as well. And so initially, there was gathering of existing data, and then I mentioned like a very interactive and engaged community engagement process with in-person meetings and sessions, small groups throughout the community, as well as an ongoing survey. And then we are in the phase, I guess I should say too, it hasn't actually been published yet, but we're in the very home stretch of it. And so basically we're looking at by the end of June, we're just kind of pulling it all together and getting it into one document and doing the formatting and the layout. And I'll have there's a home page for the whole project that I'll share at the end if people want to bookmark that or, keep an eye out for that as it comes along. But essentially, the goal of the project is that the Food System Action Plan is going to provide a blueprint for community entities to work together on short-term and long-term strategies to develop a stronger Dane County food system. Okay, so then I want to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the goals with the food action plan, and I'll kind of touch on, I think, the high points of some of those, and then, like I said, bring it back around to connections to climate work. So what you'll see when we have the final product that comes out is that we have 7 categories of overarching goals, and there'll be shortly just a little bit more information on each of these. But basically, you can see that they center on collaboration, production, access, infrastructure, efficiency, resilience, and prosperity. And in the next few slides, there'll be a little bit more information about each of those goals. And then what I didn't go into all the detail and everything today, but in the plan, under each goal, it includes a few different strategies of how to work toward and achieve those goals. And then under the strategies as well, there are specific actions on how to move forward with those. So I thought I would just share. I have a slide with just the statement, the simple statement for each goal, just to give you a sense of what these goal categories are about. So for collaboration, that's a really big one, and I don't know, like my favorite one in a way, and the one that a lot of people have been getting really excited about. And again, actually, that's what comes to my mind with connecting more with 350 Wisconsin, and definitely where I see ways that we can continue to work together on this. And so that one's all about creating a more interconnected local food system by building the social infrastructure that increases and fosters opportunities for collaboration. And so a lot of the strategies on are about getting all the different food system and food adjacent and organizations and department and kind of connecting up folks' strategic plans and what everyone's working on and really just kind of like syncing it up and putting it together and being able to figure out the synergies and how to like connect the dots and co-apply for funding and that kind of thing, and really get like governmental priorities and policies in line with those things. So that's one that I'm just particularly excited about, I guess, as an extension educator. Um, Production. The strategies are focused on increasing food production within Dane County, and prioritizing the needs of local consumers. Folks might know that there's a lot of agriculture, of course, in Dane County, but the broad majority of that agriculture isn't specifically actually for food for consumers. A lot of it is, food for livestock or crops that are grown for other purposes. While we do have the agriculture infrastructure, um, there's not as high of a focus within that on currently on um, creating a substantial amount of food to supply the needs of local consumers. Under access, that one is increasing access to affordable, healthy, and culturally relevant food. And so, I mean, that one is really talking, it gets in kind of to the nuts and bolts of, it's great to talk all day long about local food and healthy food and that type of thing, but it's really connecting the gap that can exist between sometimes the availability, the presence of that food, but whether like who actually has the means to be able to purchase it or to be able to get to it. And so looking at the different barriers that exist between actual availability and true access. Next, infrastructure is around increasing regional food system capacity for storage, processing, and distribution. So that really, gets into the nitty gritty of when we do have some amount of local food produced here, and if and when we're able to increase that more, then there's several other steps, again thinking about that whole food system model. There's several other steps from when the food is comes off the vine, so to speak, and how it kind of gets to where it needs to go. And so there's a whole lot of those pieces that need to be built out to support that aspect of the system. Number 5, around efficiency. And so that one is looking at community food resource management by reducing waste and improving recovery efforts. This is one of the ones I want to be connecting with this group. But just looking at, of course, the food waste situation, and then even connecting that to there's such a high volume of food globally, but then there's also still, of course, high rates of food insecurity. And so really trying to like connect those pieces and kind of work on what's falling through the cracks there. Resilience is increasing preparedness for chronic and emergent food system challenges. And then prosperity is around opportunities for sustainable food system careers, career pathways, training programs, youth education, that type of thing. So those are, and I think we'll probably be sharing these slides. So, oops, I keep going forward. Okay. So then lastly, with a little rest of my time here, the things that I wanted to pull out, components of the food system action plan that are also aligned with mitigating climate change. Of course, there's a lot of things around agriculture, again, like going back to what we were mentioning earlier with the high percentage of greenhouse gas emission contribution from agriculture. So there's just a whole number of things that can happen differently with agriculture. And whether it's under the terminology regenerative agriculture, sustainable, there's different methods, organic, that type of thing. But in general, the things that will reduce emissions have to do with, of course, using fewer inputs, decreasing machinery usage, trying to maintain soil composition, and so reducing things like tillage and soil disturbance. Other mechanisms for carbon sequestration are around planting or maintaining planted trees. There's, reducing livestock, certainly, but also a lot of things around changing livestock practices that can make big differences. Of course, switching from things like monocultures to more diversified crops. Um, and there's a lot of specifics around this. And so the information is out there. And I think with something like the Food System Action Plan, it's around trying to find um, driving policies and advocating for certain practices and advocating for whatever is needed. Again, there's gaps between producers and being able to get the knowledge about these different practices and changes, actually have the knowledge or have the means or the resources or the funding to be able to carry these things out. And so that I would say is a certainly a big piece of the plan, and I think a big piece that can be connected to 350 Wisconsin work. Um, Folks may be familiar with concepts like agroforestry. I know like there's the local group Savannah Institute, which does a whole lot with that, which we're lucky to have present in Dane County. So there's certainly actions and entities that are doing that work locally. Some other things that I wanted to mention are around, that are connections between our plan and climate work have to do with local food production and distribution, like we were talking about local food sourcing. And so, of course, with a globally based food system, then there's a whole lot of energy spent on transporting food long distances. But this graphic, it kind of shows like the further or the more steps and the more transportation in the longer chains. So there's certainly things with that are around reducing transportation and energy use. Um, Another piece, like I was mentioning before, about food waste. And so, again, lucky to have, I think, the Dane County Waste and Renewables Department that's been really seeking out and getting a lot of funding for working on some more food waste and sustainability practices. So there's all sorts of different steps along the way in this EPA graphic of, for one, if there's usable food, recovering that would be for the top priority. And then even in cases when that's not possible, there's a whole lot of other options between feeding animals or composting or other options, before getting to the point of that food having to go to the landfill. I know there's a statistic that says around a third of the food produced globally is lost or wasted. So we can certainly, there's a lot of possibilities of ways to make better and more use of the food that we're currently producing, but again, requires a lot of that education or resources and policies that are focusing on that. A few other things that I don't think I have listed, but just wanted to flag, is things around what we have in the plan are promoting more local and healthy food eating practices. And so that can also has connections and alignments with climate work, especially in terms of decreasing reliance on meat and dairy products. Um, Another thing I mentioned with our seventh goal was around youth education and career pathways and training programs. And I think those are really well aligned with climate and energy work. Um, Another component that I want to mention is just that, I'm sure folks on this call are familiar with the idea of environmental justice and the fact that there's populations that are disproportionately negatively impacted, and that shows up in the food system as well, like I was mentioning with food access barriers. So food justice, I think there's some intersection and overlap between food justice and environmental justice. And then lastly, really, I just kind of want to bring it back to that collaboration goal that I was highlighting, where I think overall, what I'm really hopeful about is the collaboration between food systems and what I kind of mentioned as sort of like food systems adjacent work. And so a lot of that includes environmental or other kinds of work that touch on and intersect with food systems work as well. And so really, a lot of our collaboration strategies are going to be around like making some connections, figuring out some networks with different organizations And so I'm really looking forward to that piece of it. And that was a lot of information that I just kind of blitzed through, but um, I would be happy to, like I said, share slides afterwards. I'm going to be staying on the call. Happy to talk more on this call or outside of it. So my information is there. I can also put my email in the chat and the landing page for the plan in the chat. And yeah, like I said, it'll be coming out in a couple months, and then it'll be a lot of energy around carrying out the strategies. And I'm glad that I was able to connect with you all tonight.
Yeah, thanks, Jess. That's awesome.
Sure.
Uh, so we have time for maybe one or two questions before we switch over to announcements. So there's one in the chat. What motivational sticks and carrots do you have available to encourage implementation? So kind of what you were referring
Oh,
to, that
yeah.
sort of next step, you publish it, then what? Are there any kind of strategies or incentives you have in mind already?
Yeah, well, I think that's a great question. And luckily we do have, you know, of course the bulk of the project was has been possible through some grant funding that is, coming to a close. However, luckily, just in my particular role at Extension, I'm able to it fits under my what I do for the community to be able to continue to shepherd this plan, not solely on my own, but just help lead, kind of a team. So we'll have a team dedicated to it. And as far as like what you're saying, motivational sticks and carrots, I think I'm really looking forward to like we've been getting a lot of good interest and energy. Like I keep kind of repeating myself, but with connecting sort of strategic plans and plans of work that folks already have. And so that's been coming up a lot and people are excited for it. So I think that's going to be a natural initial step is having some more of those connecting meetings. And then another just quick thing to mention is that luckily there's already some great projects underway, and one that I would highlight specifically that I won't go into detail on, but I can put the link in. But there's something called the Food Shed Partnership Project, which is already kind of like a really exciting, I don't know, like intersectional food systems project that it's like, it kind of started happening independently, but in parallel at the time of development of this plan. And it really kind of exhibits and is carrying out a lot of the things in this plan. And so in some ways it feels like a little bit of a flagship, um, I don't know, sort of implementation project that we can kind of connect. I mean, we are already connected with the folks working on that, but use it to really kind of build out and carry out some of the pieces of the plan. So I'm excited that there's already something that's basically in motion.
Yeah, that's really cool. That kind of answers one of the other questions. Can you give an example of any successes toward any of the goals? And while the plan
Yeah,
isn't done yet, there's some of that
yeah,
question. Yeah,
yeah, for sure.
cool. There's a question about will funding from the federal government continue when and if the new farm bill comes out?
Yeah. I mean, I still, I don't know, just a lot of question marks with federal funding for a lot of this type of stuff. But I will say that we weren't, so this plan was, like I said, funded under what's called a Regional Food System Partnership grant. It's specifically a planning grant, but there all are also implementation grants as well. And we kind of haven't been sure whether those are going to be offered or available or anything this funding cycle, but those did just get announced, the request for applications recently, and so it does, as of now, still seem like some of these types of projects and funding streams are happening, and so we're just gonna keep our eyes open and keep going for them and connecting with them as available. But I would say we're also really trying to embed. It's been a two-way street where it's not like, I don't want it to sound like everything in this plan was just kind of pulled out of a hat, unrelated to anything. Like we've been working with organizations. Uh, so, so a big thing is to have everything really connected where the aspects in this plan are things that are embedded into multiple departments and organizations throughout the community so that it's not just a separate thing that then, oh, if certain funding runs out, then this whole thing is a bust and it all just ends. It's more that it's going to be, or it is, and will continue to increase being embedded throughout work in the community. And then that is a way to have it have more sustainability and have more, I guess, sort of like diversified funding and resources.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense. And it makes sense from your contributor list too, or the partner list of all the different sort of entities. So awesome. All right, Susan, I'm going to ask you to bring the slides up and um, as Jess mentioned, she'll stick around for a little bit after announcements. If anyone has additional questions and wants to talk further. But at this point, we will switch over to what's coming up, ways that you can get involved or just hang out with all these cool people even more. And so I think um, we're starting with Nikki. Go ahead, one more slide. Yeah, Nikki, you're up.
Yeah, hello. I'm Nikki. If you don't know me, I am our Director of Volunteer Engagement, and I am here with our Volunteer Corner. So these are just volunteer uh, opportunities that we have running right now that are some of our higher needs. So first, monthly meeting volunteers. If you are enjoying our monthly meetings and enjoy, being able to connect with speakers and facilitate the coming together of the organization, this would be a good fit for you. It's something that we're really looking for folks to support. So if you are at all interested, let me know. And then we also are looking for some graphic design volunteers to support some of our graphic design work. Our climate connectors are our tabling volunteers. So those volunteers who go out into the community and connect with people. We're always looking for climate connectors, especially because summer is our busy season for getting out and connecting with folks. We're also just always looking for volunteers who are interested in joining any of our campaign teams. So you'll see more information on those later. And we're also currently looking for board members. So if you are interested in potential board leadership, you can let me know as well.
Awesome. I think the next slide is you as
That sounds
well,
right.
Nikki. Yeah.
So if you have questions about volunteering or about, anything really about 350 Wisconsin, what we're doing, any question at all, we have our virtual staff office hours that are generally going to be me at the moment. So the fourth Tuesday of the month, and I will put a link for those of you who are interested, but you can drop in at any point during that hour to come and ask questions. So this picture is, as Brittany said, this is our staff at the benefit concert last month, as well as super volunteer Craig.
Awesome. Thanks, Nikki. Next is
Me, yeah. So, as I'm sure you all know, there are elections coming up in Wisconsin. Yay. And in November, the state of Wisconsin will be electing its next governor. But before we do that, we have to have a primary, and there are a lot of people running. So 350 Wisconsin is co-hosting Wisconsin's Environmental Future, which is a nonpartisan gubernatorial forum. So we are going to be having a two-part forum with four candidates on Monday, May 11th, and four more candidates on Tuesday, May 19th on Zoom. I'm going to put you can register here at that link. The first evening, we will have Mandela Barnes, Missy Hughes, Sarah Rodriguez, and Kelda Royce. The second night will feature Joel Brennan, David Crowley, Francesca Hong, and Andy Mansky. Diane, yes, they will be recorded. We did invite Tom Tiffany. He declined to join us, so just interpret that as you will. But really excited to get some really firm answers from these candidates about what their vision is for a more environmentally sustainable Wisconsin, again, for both sides, Democrat and Republican. So we hope you can join us. And yes, we will be recording it and sharing it later.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Emily. I think next is no immunity for big oil.
That's me. I get to talk about this. My name is Kristen. I'm on staff. Recently, there was a bill introduced in both the House and the Senate, basically trying to pass a law that would grant all fossil fuel companies and corporations complete liability, a complete legal shield from any harm that they have caused through their emissions and climate change and all of it. It's like a huge immunity shield. And so obviously we want to reach out to our representatives and say no immunity for big oil. I just put a link in the chat where you can send a message to your representatives as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Kristen. That's important and timely. All right, next is celebration.
Yes, this is also me. I know there's a lot going on in the world that we're all constantly seeing in our feeds and on the news, but we did want to take a moment to uplift and celebrate something that came out of the PSC in recent weeks. That's the Public Service Commission here in Wisconsin. And they took significant steps to fully protect Wisconsinites from the billion-dollar data centers that are being proposed all across the state. And so this is quite a victory in protecting our water, our lands, and our communities from these data centers. So we wanted to make sure you all knew this good little nugget of news that we can hold on to.
Yes, thanks for sharing. All right. Nikki, I think we're back to you for this one.
Yeah, me again. So, if you're interested in diving into, learning more about some of these subjects, we have some upcoming trainings. So, first, we have our Climate and Democracy Power Builder. You don't have to have come to part one to come to part two and three. And these are extremely informative, kind of organizing trainings to teach you how to connect with people about climate, how we can use that to forward democracy defense and all of that good stuff. Really great trainings that I highly recommend. And then we have our Deep Canvas series running again. So deep canvassing is a technique that is used to talk to people on a really personal level through vulnerable storytelling, and has been shown to actively change people's minds, which is something that most techniques cannot say. So if you would like to learn more about how to do that and be able to practice it, we have a two-part series starting on Monday, June 8th.
Awesome. And just to confirm, Nikki, those first two dates are May, this coming.
Oh yes, they are May. That was
Yeah.
that was a goof on
It's
my
like
part.
the days are right. So
Yes, so those are May 6th and May 13th.
perfect. Okay. Um, the last thing I think we have is the upcoming monthly meetings. June 1st is our next meeting. Hard to believe we're halfway through the year. As is the case, our June meeting is a little different. It's 350's official annual meeting where we hold elections, and generally hear updates about the organization. We're planning to have it hybrid so folks can join on Zoom, but also in person at the Madison Friends Meeting House. And then from July onward, plans are still being formed, but stay tuned. And as Nikki mentioned, if you're interested in making some of those meetings happen, chat with her or any of the monthly meeting team members about getting involved. And with that, there's these slides I think will also be available. There's a lot of different teams and campaigns taking action right now. And so you can get involved with all of these folks or, okay, next slide. some of the other internal teams through these contact emails. And let's check my notes. I think that's it. Folks are welcome to reach out to these contact emails or Nikki. So with that, I think we are uh, ready to take a break. Mark, do you have an announcement?
Yeah, I thought actually that Marion and I jumping in here too early because we were gonna invite people to a program uh, May 13th at the Arboretum Housing Co-op. There is going to be a climate activist, actually the 350 staff person in Columbia, who will be doing a presentation on her work. Helena Muhlenbach, who's a climate activist, social justice activist, anti-war activist, talking about sort of the global picture, but specifically her work working with indigenous people mining through 350 in Colombia. So that'll be 6:30 at the Arboretum Housing Co-op. That information will go out through 350. I think people may have already seen it with a Zoom link if they want to watch it from their house. We're encouraging people to come to the co-op and actually be part of a program that is being sponsored by the Climate Justice Committee and by the International Solidarity Working Group. And her presentation sort of highlights the kind of work that is being done internationally around climate.
Thank you, Mark. I'll put it in the chat.
All right. Great. And then I saw another announcement added that from Kermit that there's also a regenerative agriculture event happening this week. So if you didn't get enough about agriculture in this talk, there's opportunities are available. All right, Marion, I'm
How
gonna have
timely
you.
can you get, huh?
Yeah.
I mean, same week.
Marion, you can go ahead and pause the recording if you haven't already, or stop it, I guess. Um, and then we'll have a